And I'm going to ask Mr. Khawati, is he's online? I don't know if he's online or not, but can our technical team confirm his presence here? Can anyone help us to see Mr. Khawati's situation?
Here is some technical issue. You can go ahead with.
Okay.
I'll correct and inform me here.
Okay, perfect. So, well, also, people who are listening to this discussion can post their questions online, and we can, after finishing with our panel members, we can answer to their questions too. So I'm going to ask Ms. Bولای to talk about the role of international community to bring peace to Afghanistan. And with the situation that Mr. Rafiee explained and elaborated just earlier, we know it's really dire situation for the human rights and women's rights and the marginalized group, minorities, and everyone just suffering under this situation. But how international community helped to change this situation to bring peace, sustainable peace to Afghanistan? And in your view, and based on your experience, we saw some of these, resistance against the Taliban by women of Afghanistan, which shows, the citizens of this country are not happy with the current government. And they wanted to bring, to see some changes because in their view, it's not a peaceful country right now. Do you think the coverage of media of the day protests, day activities was sufficient, or we need more, coverage, different kind of coverage from their activities to emphasize to the world, like women and people of Afghanistan demanding something else, not the Taliban. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. My name is Monika Bulaj, and I'm very honored to be part of this important debate on non-violence in Afghanistan for Afghanistan Peace and Justice Organization. My perspective is very particular because I'm a freelance photographer and writer, and my work concerns minorities, nomads, and pilgrims at risk, be they in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Caucasus, Eastern Europe, Africa, or China. My work, I can show some images to illustrate my work. Okay, so maybe it will be I hope it will work.
So, Monika, you want to share your screen with our listeners? I think you need to send the link of that presentation to our colleague so he can just share it with his screen with others. Or there's another way. Just Mr. Kunish, can you help us with this?
Okay, let's go. So, how to speak of non-violence in Afghanistan from Europe, who conducted in Afghanistan the war in the name of peace for over 20 years. How to speak of peace in Afghanistan from Europe, where 7 months ago, a free, democratic, and independent European country, Ukraine, was attacked by neighbor to destroy thousands of lives and kindergartens, retirement homes, hospitals, universities, museums, roads, homes, and bridges. But on February 24, the drama of Afghan civil society consequent to the increasing violation of human rights disappeared from the European media. In the Europe of equal rights for all, there was immediately a clear difference of the treatment of refugees, divided into categories. A, the Ukrainians, and B, those non-Europeans. In Poland, I'm from Poland, my homeland. On the Belarusian border, a handful of refugees, predominantly Muslim, Afghans, Syrians, Kurds, but also Christians from the Middle East, are considered by the Polish government not worthy of the treatment of the Geneva Convention, which was written in 1949 precisely to protect all victims of all wars, following the terrible lesson of the World War II, in which Polish people suffered so much. As today, the main actor in the Ukrainian drama is Russia. Speaking of this, it is important to remember the year of the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, the terrible 79, which marked the beginning of the destruction of an independent and free country, which never became before a European colony. Yes, I'm a photographer and writer and researcher. I'm working with minorities, and I traveled in the Afghan land alone during the war, sharing with Afghan people food, sleep, hunger, cold, whispers, love, fear. And Afghanistan is a country where the guest is a sacred, and the enchantment of a traveler is experienced as a blessing. A country imbued with ancient cultures and the mystical spirituality of Islam, the Tasawwuf, the Sufism. It is a cradle of poets, a country rich of minorities, and ancient gem which preserves the memory of humanity in encounters, thoughts, poems, songs, prayers, dances, sounds, and traditions. In 1979, the Afghans started to become a nation of orphans, widows, mutilated, and refugees. So talking about peace and non-violence in Afghanistan seems not to be easy, because right now, in theory, the 30-year-old war in Afghanistan is over. Talking about peace and non-violence in Afghanistan seems to be not easy, because right now, in theory, the 40-year-old war in Afghanistan is over. This is also stated by the smaller number of current civilian Afghan victims in the last 20 years by the Europeans cynically called collateral victims of a war in the name of peace. But it is a war in Afghanistan really over, or it's continuing? Against women, for example, in Afghanistan, girls over 12 years old have not been able to go to school for a year. Moreover, Afghanistan is the only country in the world where education is forbidden to one gender. Against the books, the school programs created with love and dedication by Afghan professors, writers, and scientists, and are now replaced with ideological education. The state school are becoming a madrasa. The war is for the children. The men of my generation often taught me in Afghanistan. They were mostly illiterate because when they were young, they stopped studying to defend their country from Russia. We are the lost generation. If we can give an instruction to all, the next generation would save Afghanistan and ourselves. They said to me around 10 years ago. So this is the war for our girls, they said to me, because a mother will educate the whole family. So the war in Afghanistan continues against minorities. You know much more better than me that Afghanistan is becoming a monoethnic state. The media is silent on the continued genocide of the Hazaras and other religious and ethnic minorities. It is also a war against state structures granting fairness and dialogue with elected representatives, against freedom of thought and expression. To survive in Afghanistan, you have to either lie or keep quiet. And what about the persecution against the Afghan journalists? We've wondered why humanity has waged war for centuries and why it is so boldly continues to do so. For example, Herodotus, the Greek historian, now says the father of history, traveled and wrote in order to answer this question, all the while listening to different people so as to describe the complexity of the world and to put both his and future generations on guard. Reporters, journalists today, witness of history, do the same things. So, for example, I am living 10 kilometers, I'm living in Italy, 10 kilometers from the EU border, where the so-called Balkan refugees corridors ends, where every day, as in this photo you have seen, dozens, if not
not hundreds of people and families arrive, especially from Afghanistan. There are those who left years ago who are still children. They often don't even remember why they left from Afghanistan. Their scared bodies are a map of the suffering and Eurasian geography. Alongside them came also those who have left more recently, and many people, you know, around hundreds of people maybe, left every day Kabul towards the Iranian border, teenagers, eldest sons, orphans. And the history is written with the feet of those who dared to leave everything. But in the case of Afghanistan, perhaps we are seeing a type of migration with unimaginable consequence. What does it mean? Not only from the geopolitical point of view, but above all, a cultural, emotional, human one. So during their journey, they have lost siblings and friends. On the Iranian border, they have been shot and at or burned alive. On the Pakistani border, they have been murdered by traffickers and bandits. On the Turkish border, they have frozen to death in the Kurdish snows. On the border of Europe, they have drowned in the Mediterranean. As if that's not enough, those who manage to get to Europe on foot are often beaten by border police and by paramilitary groups paid by the European Union in Bulgaria, Greece, and Croatia. Others are brutally driven off by Poland, who is playing a game of geopolitical ping pong with Belarus, itself supported by Russia, which keeps refugees trapped for months in the mud and frost, surrounded by barbed wire with barely and food and without food. So how then can we hold a dialogue using non-violent means against a totalitarian worldview? How can we talk of peace and non-violence when it comes to Afghanistan, where state violence is committed against its own citizen and an entire generation has disappeared just because it is educated? The more fortunate individuals end up in Europe, while others finish in neighboring countries, constantly worrying about being forcibly repatriated in Afghanistan, where they risk being tortured, killed, or hidden behind closed doors, regularly changing address to stay safe. So there are a lot of issues behind the word peace. For example, can forgiveness exist without justice? Peace is built like a bridge from one bank to the other. In ancient times, the construction of a stone bridge required a sacrifice. Peace is forged also with enemies. There will be no peace if, when speaking to others, we listen only to points which remains us of ourselves. These being the words of Italian priest Paolo Dall'Olio in 2013, who had lived among Muslims in Syria for a long time. He pronounced them a few months before encountering an Daesh militia in Raqqa while trying to open a dialogue. When one meets the executioner, he asks, how can I keep my heart meek and mild? The answer is that one must believe that dialogue is always possible. So the experiences of the past 20 years have created a culture of understanding among young Afghans. You cannot unlearn the freedom. It is necessary to beware of the trap of the fear, which leads to tribal egotism and the exclusion of minorities. It is necessary to beware of the trap of the hate, because the death of innocence changes you. It is necessary to pray for one's enemies and for whoever fights with nothing but words, so that one may see in one's adversary a person and not an enemy. It is necessary to speak the adversary's language in order to find a kind of symbolic breaks, such as metaphors, poetry, theology, and proverbs. The Afghans, perhaps, are the only ones who can do this. But how can this be done with those who fight against freedom of speech, against those who stifle words? They are very difficult questions. And answer is important because it means disagreement with injustice, but only the light can give it clarity. But how can one moderate it? Witnesses, mediators, observers, journalists, peacemakers, diplomacy, dialogue, all these are necessary. A key word must be found, a symbolic image. So Father Paulo Dall'Olio, the builder of the Tent of Abraham, those who promotes dialogue, he's disappeared in Raqqa in 2013 after entering a building that would later become the headquarters of a self-proclaimed Caliph, Ali Baghdadi. He entered in order to talk and vanished forever. Not even his body, his clothes, his voice, footage or photos remained to be mourned over. Maybe the answer is in Afghanistan, the cradle of Sufism and poets, where there were verses of Khayyam, Attar, Ansari, Jami, Sanai, Bidel, Ferdowsi, Rumi, and Hafiz are known by heart. The land of a mystic painter Bihzad and Sultan Shah Rukh Mirza, son of Tamerlan, the destroyer. However, he did not build a pyramid of skulls as his father did in Baghdad, but architectural wonders in Herat. Afghanistan is the crossroad of the free tariqa, the spiritual road. The Naqshbandiya brotherhood from Bukhara, the Qadriya from Baghdad, the Chistitiya from the mountains east of Herat, silence, zeal, and sound. They are the three main paths of Afghan Sufism. And so the answer also is in Europe. Which has learned from its own wars. It knows very well, no more than ever before, how fragile democracy is, with the phantoms of populism and the far right lurking in the shadows. For Europe, that means caring for the refugee. Hospitality is a revolutionary political act. It breaks the spell of fear. A closed Europe means a frightened Europe, open to a new totalitarianism. The answer can also be found among educated Afghan exiles who are lucky to be safe in Europe and can put their knowledge in the service to all Afghans. So answering for your question, what can be done from the international community? The first question, the question of refugees, to have the rules to conduct people in a better situation and to help them to create a kind of network to dialogue. And for example, finding organization who can lead this network between Afghans in exile, the diaspora, Afghan intellectuals, funding, for example, journalism journal for Afghan diaspora, financing a kind of networks to educate Afghans online from here, for example, from Europe. But the most important thing is the political of refugees, because this is the main key to the problems, because refugees from Afghanistan have no way. For example, we know that Italian government created a place for 1,200 people in the beginning of November 2021, and not just now. From the last month, some people start to come, but we are talking about 1,200 people. So this is very important question, and we should keep looking for a way out between the diaspora. If there is someone who can talk in Afghanistan with someone in Afghanistan. So I think the biggest goal is the information about what is happening in Afghanistan. For example, the news from last day is that UNESCO has just allocated $2 billion budget to support Afghan journalists who want to return or who work here. This is very important news. But the first thing I think is to make a better refugee reception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monika. You actually remind us how the culture of Afghanistan is rich, and you mentioned about our history, our past, and poets, important people, and the culture that we created inside of Afghanistan and delivered it to the region. And we had a role in reaching the culture in the region. So I hope, we have that situation again, that we can contribute to making and empowering our past and using that past for a better future, which is, as Mr. Rafiee mentioned, coexistence. We need to live together. We need to build that country. It's great. Thank you very much for the solutions, for supporting Afghanistan and Afghan refugees from the international, eyes. Oh, it's very important. Thank you.